What does it tell us? Is it a new norm for society? We saw it played out roughly 2 weeks ago in Butler, Pennsylvania, at former President Donald Trump's re-election rally, where 4 people were injured, innocent bystanders, and 2 were dead. 1 innocent bystander and the shooter. Horrible, tragic. But what is it telling us? How is it impacting you? What is the threat to law enforcement? Also, how is it impacting political candidates? Today on Bets and Badges, we have the honor of introducing Mayor Mike Davey, former mayor of Key Biscayne, currently running for Congress, a person who can tell us what the sentiment is, the public sentiment, what you're seeing out there in the community as you're stumping. I am Robert Asencio, and to my right, at the end of the table, we have my co-host, retired police chief, military historian, David Magnusson. How are you, sir?
Doing well. How about yourself?
Awesome. Let's get into it.
Yes.
Mike, how are you? Welcome.
I'm living the dream. Living the dream. Thanks for having me.
Call you Mike Davey. Mike.
Absolutely.
For short.
That works.
So, what did you think when you heard or saw the former president, being shot at a political rally?
Well, yeah, your first instinct is, I hope nobody got hurt. Unfortunately, as you said, one innocent bystander, somebody there just to attend a political rally, was killed, and then fortunately they were able to take out the shooter before any more people, and 2 people were injured, and then fortunately before anybody else was injured or killed, they took out the shooter. But again, political violence has no place in America. We are a society where we have the freedom of expression and the freedom of debate. That's what makes a great democracy, is a healthy debate. But violence has no place in public discourse or political discourse.
Yeah, for sure. So for our audience's benefit, right, whether they hear it or see it on Bets and Badges, tell us a little bit about yourself. You're the former mayor of Key Biscayne.
I'm a former mayor of Key Biscayne. I was in elected office for 12 years out there. Worked hard for our community, worked with our police officers, and made sure, one of our concerns was always their safety. Key Biscayne's a small town, but every day our police officers went out. They were putting their lives on the line. They never knew who they were, stopping, where they were pulling over, what the incidents were going to be. And particularly, frankly, in the state of Florida, I was always concerned. We had, no, you don't need a concealed permit anymore. You've got people are more, weapons are more accessible to them, and that puts law enforcement in danger.
Yeah. Chief, we know Mayor Davey from when he served in the city of Key Biscayne, or the village of Key Biscayne. What are your thoughts on what he just said?
No, I mean, he's absolutely right. Bad people go to good places. Okay, so as great a place as Key Biscayne is, the department, every officer has to be on the P's and Q's, much like they would have to be in Philadelphia, New York City, Boston, what have you, LA, okay? Just because a place is a little bit smaller or the community may be more well-to-do, that means nothing. And so you want to afford the officers, all officers across this country, the opportunity to protect themselves, to have adequate backup as needed, and most of all, to have the equipment needed so they're not outgunned. Unfortunately, in a country where the weaponry is all over the place and in the hands of bad people.
Yeah. So let's go back to the political violence tempo, if you will. So you're now running for Congress,
right?
Running to go to the national scene in D.C. You're out there stumping, right?
Yes.
Campaigning, if you will, and your district is. Tell us a little bit about the district, the geography.
So the geography is pretty simple. It's Key Biscayne in the east, then it goes up through the port up to 836. It goes west out 836 to 107th Avenue, drops down just below FIU's main campus, then goes back out west to the Turnpike and drops down the Turnpike into Cutler Bay, and then it takes in everything east of that. So it's a good chunk of Miami-Dade County.
So you're out there visiting residents and voters in that area, right? And you're talking to people in the community. Do you get a sense that we're a divided country?
Oh yeah, I think politically we have a lot of divisions in this country, and a lot of it. there's a lot of rhetoric out there. There's a lot of people trying to churn up anger and frustration. And we've got to do a better job of just having the discourse with those who we disagree with and not resorting to violence. I think we've got to do a better job of letting words be the response and not violence.
Are you seeing some of this animosity being displayed towards you or towards campaigns in general?
No, I mean, I haven't experienced it. No, I think I've had people certainly challenge me and say things, but then I try to look. I've been, as I've said just a minute ago, I was a mayor, right? I was a nonpartisan no party affiliation position, and so you have to work with everybody. When you represent a district, you don't just represent those who voted for you. You represent everybody. So you've got to be able to have a conversation with those, even if they vehemently disagree with what you stand for. No, I haven't had people get aggressive with me, but it's certainly, not just because of what happened in Butler County, but it's in the back of your mind when you're talking to folks to make sure that you want to make sure that violence is something you keep in mind, but you don't expect it, frankly.
So it is affecting you, right?
Yeah, I think it's something we have to consider, right? You have to consider there are reckless people out there, as the person was in Butler County. They're unstable. They have anger issues or whatever prompted him to make the attempt on the former president. You've got to keep that in mind.
So you're treading the needle, personal safety versus public service, right? Which is mean you're exposed, you're vulnerable to the public. David, you're a constituent, you're in the district, and I wanted to turn the conversation quickly to issues, right? We have a safety issue out there, and we can talk about with the guns and what have you. And then we also have what constituents need. What are your thoughts as a constituent? What would you tell? What do you want from your member of Congress?
Law enforcement rises to the top. The sound law enforcement, concern for law enforcement, and I'll tell you what as a constituent, just open-mindedness, not to sway one way or other, too far to one side or the other, out on the extremes, moderate, and follow up on that. Somebody that, from what I want, again, and I may not speak for the next constituent, but somebody that can go down the middle, talk to all people, hear every side, debate. If you don't agree, fair enough, and that's fine, but not to pigeonhole other people because they disagree with a certain opinion. I've grown tired of that, and tired is a very soft word I'm using. So that's what I would do. Law enforcement will always rise to the top for me. The lower taxes, all this stuff, everything that goes along with it. But I'm thinking Congress, I'm thinking on a more global level, higher level, higher altitude, bringing people together. If you disagree, if I disagree with you, if I say something that totally is against what you say, don't pigeonhole me and call me something that I'm not, because that seems to be the word of the day. I'm not with that. I want somebody that listens to all sides, and moves forward, and that's it. You're never going to please everybody, as Lincoln said. It's not going to happen, and that's fine. Nobody expects that. Just don't pigeonhole people and dub them things they're not.
So for the constituents that are asking from you, right? I think it's fair to say that society as a whole, many people in society have lost confidence in members of Congress, right?
Absolutely.
And what do you tell them as a aspiring member who wants not just to gain their vote, but wants to serve them in Congress? What do you tell the people who are feeling the stress of this lack of confidence?
Well, I think to what the chief just said, we do need to be able to reach out. We can disagree, right? I mean, look, 12 years in local politics, you disagree with people. I think I've disagreed probably with everybody in the village of Key Biscayne, including my wife, about some issue. But the fact is, we've got to still be able to work together for the betterment of our community. And I think what we've lost at the national level is that ability for compromise. I think you still have compromise. You still see some bipartisan, but we are seeing this divide get larger and larger between people, and that shouldn't be happening. We should be able to sit down even after a heated debate. We should still be able to sit down for a drink or a dinner afterward and talk it out as people, because we are all I believe, trying to make our nation better. It's just a matter of how we believe we need to get there.
So we have this level of tribalism, if you will,
Yeah.
right? And it's usually along party lines and ideology. So let's talk about the issues that you want to take to Congress, the issues that you feel, or you want to fight in Congress, the issues that you feel that are most important for the district. We know safety, right, is one.
So, I mean, I suppose there's nuts and bolts issues. And of course, law enforcement's always been top of mind for me. I mean, as a local leader, I've always prioritized public safety, our law enforcement folks, our fire folks, everybody throughout the village. You need to take care of first of all, you need to take care of your village employees. You want good employees. You can't just treat them as cogs. They're not just fungible. They're not just replaceable. When you get good people, you want to keep them. I think my track record on that is strong. When it comes to the national scene, I mean, look, this election is about defending freedom. It's about making sure that we still have a democracy when we get to the other side. And that's not hyperbole. I'm a former Republican. I'm not somebody who's just became a Democrat for just any reason. I believe in small government. I believe in individual liberties. But what we're seeing now is we need to defend those things. When you get to nuts and bolts issues, I want to make sure infrastructure is taken care of. We've got a lot of issues in this district that have not been taken care of.
What are those infrastructure issues, please?
So let's talk about septic to sewer. We have a lot of people still on septic systems that need to be switched over to sewer.
Is that a congressional issue?
The financing is, because you have infrastructure, and the infrastructure bill that was passed, my opponent in November voted against the bill. And the one thing that we can all agree, it's a bipartisan agreement in this district, is we need money for infrastructure. We need money for stormwater improvements, because we're going to need part of the infrastructure, part of that stormwater plan has got to be filtration. Because if we're just pumping stormwater out into the bay with the pesticides, with the petroleum products, with other chemicals, we're going to be killing the bay. And the bay is one of the biggest economic drivers of Miami-Dade County. And we need to do everything we can to improve the bay. So again, that's part of infrastructure and improving the environment. We've got a waste treatment plant out on Virginia Key that needs about $1.2 billion of work. We need to find federal dollars to help make that happen. We've got sewer lines that are running under the bay that are cracked, that are allowing untreated wastewater to escape into the bay that's causing all sorts of environmental issues. We've got to treat that. We've got other issues with regard to, again, runoff. Transit is another issue that we need to address, mass transit. And one of the issues we have is we need funding.
I know we're about to vote on a referendum, right, for whether or not the county taxpayers want to expand the transit system. David, what are your thoughts as a taxpayer, as a person who lives in the district, as to these issues?
Well, for transit, big cities need big transit.
Right.
I mean, if you want to compete, if you want to work your way up to light heavyweight or heavyweight, and move out of the middleweight ranks, these are some of the things you have to do. It has to be explained properly to the people and understand, both sides of the coin, and make your own decision. I'm not I wouldn't be here trying to twist arms. I am for it. The next person may not be, and that's fine. And that's because we're talking as we are here, respectfully. We're talking calmly. We're talking about issues. We're not, as you mentioned earlier, sort of going off the rails where there's no respect anymore, where people can't talk to one another and try to come to some sort of happy medium.
Right.
Civility and statesmanship. So another thought, something that you and I spent almost 30 years fighting was crime, right? The crime rate in the county. Now, we know Miami-Dade County as a whole, crime has not necessarily spiked, but that is an issue. And usually crime rate are tied to economic issues. How do you see it?
Well, crime's down. I mean, nationally, crime is down. That doesn't mean we can't do a better job of fighting crime.
What would you do at the federal level? What would you champion as far as helping reduce and ensure safety, increase safety, public safety? Let's put it that way.
Well, the first thing I would do is work on reducing the access of people to dangerous weapons, assault rifles, things like that. In large magazines.
About complete, taking guns away from people?
Look, here's what I don't want to take guns away from people, but my point would be, when people got killed by Tylenol, right? 8 people died or 3 people died from Tylenol back in the 80s. We took Tylenol off the shelf until we figured out a way to make sure that Tylenol was safe. And I think at this point, we have allowed so many mass killings to happen with weapons that we have to take steps until we have a plan in place to fix it. I don't think everybody should be entitled to just walk into a store and buy an assault rifle. I don't think that's right.
So
I think
assault weapons.
weapons.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're talking about common sense legislation,
Absolutely.
right?
I think we have to work together. We can find common ground to protect people. I mean, protect law enforcement. If we're talking about law enforcement is the one who, they're the people who have to go in and deal with these issues. When you have a school shooting, when you have a club shooting, when you have a synagogue shooting, we have to do a better job as a society. When your kids are afraid to go to school, I was talking at a high school back in March, and the kids were asking me, what will you do to make us feel safer from gun violence in our schools? And we are failing as a society when our kids are afraid of their schools being under attack. When that's a real consideration, we're not doing our jobs. So we have to figure out how we're going to regulate weapons, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of the state.
Second Amendment.
That's exactly right. But it starts a well-regulated militia. We need regulation. We need regulation of weapons so they're not falling into the hands of people who shouldn't have them. We need training. People should have to be trained on weapons. They should have to register their weapons. They should have to safely store them. The ammunition should be stored. They don't need high-capacity magazines. Regular citizens do not need high-capacity magazines for just their everyday going to the range shooting.
David, as a former police chief, right, as a police commander in the city of Miami for almost 30 years, what are your comments to the former mayor who's going to be a member of Congress?
Oh, stats don't lie. During the 94 to 04 period, when the Clinton administration put forth the assault weapon ban, there was a marked difference than when President George W. Bush allowed it to lapse from 04 to 14. And from 14 now, moving forward, it hasn't been a full 10-year cycle. You can see the statistics. You can see the amount of incidents. Listen, nobody can argue that if there is going to be an incident with somebody with a handgun versus somebody with an assault weapon, the opportunity of killing a lot more people comes with the assault weapon. Yeah. The opportunity to kill more cops comes with the assault weapon. All right. I don't think anybody's here. I'm pro Second Amendment for sure. There's no issue with that whatsoever with me. I stand by all. Actually, I love all 10 of the first all 10 amendments that make up the Bill of Rights. Starting with the first one, first and foremost. That being said, this sort of weaponry, you just got to take a good look at what's happening and what weapons being used during these heinous crimes. Right. Look what happened the other day. For better or worse, the guy up on that roof wasn't using a sniper's rifle. He was using an AR. It's not typically the type of weapon you want to use in a situation like that. Thank God, for the former president and for the rest of the crowd, because he could have taken out a heck of a lot more people. There's just common sense. For instance, we've had this discussion. Had he used a bump stock and just decided to, spray and pray, God knows what could happen. And yet they just said, the courts, that, you can't ban the bump stock.
So explain to the audience what a bump stock is.
It's a gadget that goes on the weaponry around the trigger base that turns for lack of a better word, it'll turn a semi-auto into a fully automatic. The guy in Las Vegas did it from
the Mandalay Hotel.
At the Mandalay, some 17, 18 stories up, firing on a crowd, and you saw the carnage that took place of that. You don't even have to aim; you just fire if you have enough ammunition. The thing is, if you're looking after your cops, and most cops are conservative in their mindset, and I get that. But if you're looking at cops, we've seen a number of officers gunned down from assault weapons. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you what: you ask any of them, would they prefer to have the assault weapon out there or not? They would say no. Right. Would they prefer to see somebody that hasn't been trained with a concealed weapon without the permit now walking down the street? They would say no.
Yeah. How many times have you come up or know of other officers come up on somebody that's armed, pointing a weapon at somebody, and by the grace of God, it turns out that the officer doesn't shoot him, but it turns out that person was an innocent person or victim of a crime, but yet came very, very close to shooting.
Well, that or security guards. I mean, it's happened. And I have my own experiences when I left Florida and was chief in North Carolina, where they have open carry. And me drawing down on somebody that's on a track shooting a weapon, and they're saying, "What are you doing? It's open carry. We can carry a gun like that." I'm telling you, the officer can't. They may over there, but here, something like that. It's not legislated yet. I'm not saying it's coming, but you can't tell me at all that any officer feels more comfortable with a guy with a gun strapped to his side, to his hip, than if he didn't have it there, because they got the one up on you. You got people here with the weaponry just because they can. I'm saying here in this country, that are going to Walmart or 7-Eleven with an assault weapon strapped behind them. And my thoughts are, I love guns. Why don't you just carry a concealed weapon on you that nobody knows you're armed? I mean, what is this about from the Napoleon complex point of view? You got to walk out to go to a 7-Eleven with it slung behind you. And let me tell you, if it's slung behind you, I could disarm you a lot quicker than you can pull that weapon out. For sure.
So let's go to the other big issues that seem to be resonating with people this election cycle. I know that early voting started today.
It
did. The primary election is, correct me if I'm wrong, August 20th. Am I right?
Correct.
Okay. So there's some top line issues that people are most concerned about. Household economics. Mm-hmm. At the federal level, you're going to be confronted with helping the local community, but also mental health, right?
Yes.
Conditions, education, women's rights.
Right.
Talk to us a little bit about that, because I want to get to one point about accountability that you have made a point to really stress as part of your campaign.
Okay, so I mean, first, when you talk about the household economies, we're seeing a lot of people are suffering, and part of that was inflation that came out of COVID. Part of it is we've seen, look, the stock market's been going through the roof, and you can see that when
in a positive way.
Yeah, it's going through the roof. But the reason a lot of these companies, their profits are up, is because they're able to take a larger. It's basic economics, right? When you're charging more than it's costing you to make something, that's profit. And so what we're seeing is companies, there's investigations now as to, is there any price gouging going on? We know that when it comes to petroleum, we know that there was a gentleman in Texas who was just recently indicted for trying to conspire with OPEC to elevate petroleum oil prices. The federal government's got to be on top of that stuff. I'm 100% a capitalist, but I don't want people being taken advantage of, and I don't want, I do not want to see people conspiring to keep prices elevated so that the basic consumer is suffering. That has to be looked into. Property insurance, all insurance costs have to be reviewed. We've got to take a really hard look at how we're dealing with insurance in this country, because it's bankrupting people. Health insurance is bankrupting people. In Florida, particularly, property insurance is a huge problem. There is one bill pending right now where the federal government would act as a backstop to property reinsurance, which might be able to reduce costs.
Are you a proponent for that?
I would be a supporter of that. Yeah, Jared Moskowitz up in Broward is one of the guys who's bringing it forward. Absolutely. I think we need to be looking at ways that the federal government can help. It would act as a backstop. Essentially, the states would be the ones putting up the bonds. I don't want to get too technical on it, but it's a way to reduce cost to consumers, because 40% of your property insurance bill is the reinsurance portion, right? So if we can help reduce the cost of that reinsurance, we can hopefully, we're going to make a way so that that savings is passed on to the consumer.
Absolutely, and save some people from having to leave the state, because
absolutely
there's a large number of homeowners that are having to bail out, because
particularly people on fixed incomes, right? Yeah. You have the elderly who are on fixed incomes who are now seeing their costs skyrocket on their condominiums or on their homes. And we have to look and see what we can do at the federal level to assist that. Now, it's a state issue, but we've got to help. And I think with other insurances, again, I think we should be looking at nationalizing markets, allowing more competitors into every state, have national standards, but let's look at how we can allow insurance companies to compete more broadly.
Outstanding. So, question about women's rights. That seems to be a major topic of conversation this cycle.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate that this issue has come up again. I believe that we should codify Roe v. Wade. I believe women's bodily autonomy is their right. They have absolute control over their body. So I marched for ERA when I was 9 years old, and I will continue to support women's right to choose and do what they will with their bodies.
Okay, we have 7 minutes, and I want to get to something. David, you ran investigative units. You did robbery. I guess this can be construed as somewhat of a form of robbery, theft. acquiescing and utilizing your position for personal benefit of either those that bring in the issues or you yourself. So let me break it down to what I'm speaking about. We know that the Supreme Court justices, there's been information that has come forth in the last few months. Some of the Supreme Court justices have admitted, like Clarence Thomas, taking benefit from individuals who had issues come up before them for the court, and then ruling on them or presiding over them. What are your thoughts on that? Because I want to get to what Mike wants to propose here.
I've seen many times here locally where judges recuse themselves because it's the right thing to do. I've seen politicians throughout Dade County, to their credit, Democrat, Republican, speak up and recuse themselves from certain things because it just doesn't look right. You know, going back a decade, well, 5 years, heck, 2 years, the greatest respect I have for probably any entity in this country was the Supreme Court of the United States. They've been compromised. I'm sorry. I mean, you're either ethical or you're not. When you're making these big decisions, and that goes back to January 6th too, when you're deciding upon something where his wife may or may not have been involved in something. I don't know how you justify it by sitting there. To me, it's arrogance. And, you ask me, I'll tell you. It's arrogance. You stand up for what's right, you do the right thing, or you don't.
So, Mike, you proposed, on point, thank you. You proposed
an impeachment inquiry. Correct, into both, into Thomas and Alito.
It's unprecedented, but please.
Well, it's not actually. We had Samuel Chase was impeached back in 1804
in our lifetime.
Well, okay, yeah, fair. I don't know how old you are, but yeah, I wasn't around in 1804. But
I look really good.
But look, to the chief's point, the appearance of impropriety is bad enough, right? I have, again, I've been in times where there would have been the appearance of impropriety had I sat on the dais for something that came before my counsel. So I recused myself. I said I had a relationship with the architect who was bringing a variance. I had a relationship with somebody who lived in a building that was getting a determination from the village. I recused myself in those situations, even though I didn't really have a dog in the fight, but I recused myself. These two justices on the Supreme Court took gifts from benefactors and then, as to your point, ruled. We're sitting on their dais and ruled on matters when those benefactors when their benefactors' interests were before the Supreme Court. That is, it's unethical. It's not right. Not only is it the appearance of impropriety, it is completely unethical. If you've got somebody who's actually given you a gift and you're taking, without disclosing it, by the way, neither one had disclosed until later when the press caught up with them. It's just wrong. And then I agree with you on January 6th, those matters, because Justice Thomas's wife was allegedly involved in some of the issues. I think he should have recused himself on that as well. But we have to have standard. We as public officials need to live up to the best of our society. We have to try and be the best. Even if there was just the appearance, they should have recused themselves. But the fact that they actually took benefits and didn't disclose them and then ruled, it's unethical. It's not right.
Can you give us a quick, state the obvious if it is, but give us a quick answer as to why it's important for voters to support someone that wants to go to Congress, that wants to hold the Supreme Court justices accountable?
Look, we have to have faith in our institutions. And I think the American people want to have faith, and they need to have faith in their members of Congress so that they can have faith in all of the institutions. And we need to hold each other accountable. If I do something like that, I expect to be held accountable. I hold myself to ethical standards because that's what I want. Look, I want my children to be ethical. I believe in ethics. I believe that's what makes America great, is being an ethical. Our government should be ascribing to, seeking to achieve good ethical, moral solutions. We should be those people. And when you're in public office, you need to be held accountable.
So I could take it from what you're saying. You go to Congress, you're not going to be part of the extremism.
No, absolutely not.
Okay,
it doesn't work.
Awesome. David, any closing thoughts?
But when you have, coming full circle, when you have a blatant disregard for what's right, regardless. When you're out on the fringes, ultimately, that's what when the press become the enemy of the people, which is it's not a dog whistle, it's a foghorn to some on the extremes. You can see how political violence can come into the fray, and it often does. I mean, we want to compare now to '68, and there was enough of that to go around, and then there's enough comparisons to be made. And if we don't listen to the words of Santayana, we're going to here we are again. But it's almost become acceptable in some circles, that and/or the lack of bravery and courage to stand up and go Hans Christian Andersen with the emperor's clothes and say, no, I don't see it. This is no person standing there naked. Dude, what are you talking about? That's what we need in this country, is the courage.
Yeah.
And I don't care if it's coming from a Democrat or Republican, but the courage to stand up for what's right. And seemingly, somewhere in the last couple of years, it's a bunch of eunuchs.
Yeah. So last thought, real quick. President Biden has announced he's no longer running for re-election. Kamala Harris, the VP of the United States, is now the presumptive nominee, going to be running for president. What are your thoughts? And
look, I'm excited. I think she's really energized. As a Democrat, she's energized the party. We see it in the streets. We see it in people's responses when you're knocking on doors. People are fired up again.
Do you think she'll bring unity?
Yes, I do. I think I think that. Look, I think Biden tried to bring unity. I don't think Joe Biden was a divider. I think Joe Biden was always trying to reach bipartisan. Look at the immigration bill. I mean, there's so many ways where he was trying to seek bipartisan support for things and trying to create bipartisan camaraderie. He's always done that throughout his career. I think Kamala Harris will do the same, and I'm excited about it.
Good. So, thank you.
Thank you.
For those of you out there, we have been speaking with former Mayor Mike Davey of the village of Key Biscayne in South Florida, who is currently running for Congress in Florida's Congressional District 27. I urge you to please look him up at Mike Davey for Congress. Am I right?
That's correct.
.com. Mike Davey for Congress. Davey. The spelling's up on the screen. On that note, we'd like to thank you, the audience. I'd like to thank the Millers, the Miami's Community News team, Donnie, our producer behind the scenes, my co-host, our guests, and you, the audience. We'll speak to you next time.